So I took the folded piece, I ironed it flat, really flat as I can. Before I started to iron, you know, the fabric doesn't inherently want to lay nicely to itself, so sometimes you really have to take your thumb and your pointer finger and roll the fabric away from itself and push the seam to the top. Really try to get as close to the seam as possible so that your seam allowance will lay down nicely inside there. See how it's really flat and the fold is very close to where the seam is. It's not perfect. Then I drew a guideline which should be 1/2 of an inch. So for the first seam we did 1/4 of an inch. For the second seam we're going to do 1/2 of an inch. And I drew a guideline and I also put tape on the machine, which you'll see when there we go. Start sewing. Okay. I also want to show you, so I'm going to line up the edge of the fabric with the tape that I have that is marking off the 1/2 of an inch from the needle. I'm going to start all the way at the outside, at the end. Do a normal seam, back stitch, go forward. And I'm going to be really careful. I'm also really close to my mark that I drew. And remember I said I was going to show you the right way and the wrong way. So if I continue to maintain my 1/2 of an inch seam allowance and I do a good job, in theory, we'll never see the seam allowance, which is inside, tucked inside these two pieces when I flip this out. But I'm going to intentionally sew it incorrectly. Now I'm going to go inside of my line quite a bit here at the end, and we should be able to see the difference. I'm going to move this again. So let's see. Well, actually, I didn't do a dramatically good enough job, but here's where I was intending to hide the seam. See how the seam allowance, the edges are completely encased in this other seam. So when we flip it out, you can't see it. Can't see any signs of the raw edges on either side, except at the very bottom I tried to sew it out so you could see some of the raw edges popping out. I went off my 1/2 inch mark, but not enough for it to be really significant. I will make another sample and show it to you both while we're chatting on Zoom.